Sesame Street was everywhere growing up, a staple on PBS that shaped so many of us before we were old enough to dive into the shows like Batman Beyond, Transformers, Cybertron, or the Clone Wars. Personally, I wouldn't call myself a huge fan, but I've always respected what Sesame Street did to mold generations of kids like myself. My fondest memory of a Muppet-style character isn't Elmo or Kermit from the Muppets, but the iPhone game Puppet War. I played the heck out of it when I got my first Apple device, not just obsessing over the first game, but also anticipating the release of the second. That's kind of the same energy I see in the reaction of this HasLab. Cookie Monster, cute, iconic, nostalgic, sure, but ultimately it caters to too small and niche of a fan base to succeed. So let's dive into the failure of the Cookie Monster HasLab. Celebrating their 50th anniversary, Sesame Street and Hasbro worked together to create the HasLab Cookie Monster, a fully posable replica of the character. It had articulated fingers, a posable mouth, and a full fabric construction, all for what they saw as a low price of $300. But I have one question: why? I really don't know who they thought was buying this. Were they targeting cookie fans, puppet collectors maybe, Sesame Street collectors, or kids? Like, no kid is convincing Papa the Hut to buy this, if they couldn't even convince him to buy them the Reva lightsaber. And let me play devil's advocate. What is up with Sesame Street collectors? Is this something I don't know about? Is there a community building entire diorama style displays like a Star Wars, Marvel, and Transformers collectors? Cause if so, I won't lie, that's gonna be pretty cool. Imagine an entire Sesame Street diorama. Maybe this Cookie Monster was a centerpiece item for them, but still, this clearly had no clear audience or collector. I can imagine maybe toy store owners, vendors, or hardcore pop culture collectors. When researching, I found a puppet collector who wanted this, and I felt even he was trying to figure out who wanted this. He suggested dentists use this in their offices for calming the children.
I'm not a professional photographer, and maybe you're a doctor or a dentist, or maybe you know a doctor or a dentist that might think this was a pretty cool thing to have in their office. Imagine a kid that's afraid to go to the doctor coming in to see essentially a friend that he's familiar with.
But I don't blame him. He was trying to market it for Hasbro, and I would have pulled something out of anywhere as well. There was clearly some doubts if this would even fund with their extremely low backer ask of $3,000, but the sale barge only needed $5,000. You're telling me they figured only $2,000 less was a feasible amount for something way less popular? Besides that glaring problem, let's take a step back and look at it from a fan perspective. This HasLab just lacked anything besides the accuracy and size. No electronics, play value. They chose a good character, or at least that's what I thought. Other fans online would have preferred other Muppets or other characters, but I would have either wanted this guy or Big Bird. Honestly, I think this would have funded if they gave me a life-size Big Bird instead. I think that should be the next HasLab if Hasbro ever gets the license back for Sesame Street. Then let's review the reveal. A designer was interviewed, and this is where I found that Sesame Street collector we were looking for. This YouTuber collects all things Sesame Street. He definitely backed this one, and I'm sorry to him for the outcome. We'll discuss later, but speaking purely from a HasLab potential buyer's perspective, the prototype shown just doesn't come off as a high-end collectible. It essentially looks like just a giant plush that you can buy for like $50 or $60 from a fair. When the designer is messing around with the posability, he hugs this thing like his life depends on it. This is advertised as a posable figure and shown standing on its own, but he holds it like it can't support itself. Other showcases show it standing up, but maybe that's just a very specific position. The reveal of this designer just didn't give me confidence that you would be able to put in all these different positions you wanted to if you were a fan of it. So no play features, possibility of it falling on itself, no display stand, and accessories to be revealed later, which ended up being a cookie and 2 lithographs. And of course, you're gonna need a cookie when you put a Cookie Monster. But this cookie was just like this printed piece. I feel like a rubber toy version would have looked a lot better. Both options are kind of cheap looking, but at least the rubber toy version really plays into the kid-friendly aspect of it. It would have also given it a lot more color than this pale printed version. I couldn't help but notice how many times the designer was really stressing that it was a prototype.
This is our prototype, so all of you out there that think this is pretty good, it's only gonna get better.
And respectfully, if you're already talking down on the product and hoping I buy in before seeing the finished result, good luck. I grew up with gaming industry trust issues. Show me the finished product and I'll back into it. But even then I have to worry about some last minute changes being done, like the future HasLab to this one being the Unicron HasLab. I think it's funny that the page had a hard limit of 5, like let people get as many as they want for this one. You're gonna need it, Hasbro. Now this figure released when Hasbro was still figuring out the HasLab model, but this one came with no stretch goals, just further highlighting that Hasbro was praying it funded in the first place. Now for the $300 they're asking for, I'm expecting a fresh box of cookies and milk included with the purchase of this HasLab. Ultimately this toy obviously didn't fund, but they could have had this successful sell if they just didn't use the HasLab model. Not every big collectible needs to be a HasLab. Sometimes Hasbro seems to confuse creating a dream project with just making something big. Other companies have proven you can bring replicas of this scale to life without crowdfunding. We've seen life-size Chucky dolls, Annabelles, Kermit the Frog, and more recently NECA jumped on Megan, right as the movie found its audience in the horror niche, and they're already selling it to that fan base. This is a life-size Megan with hair, it has an autograph when you buy it. The point is Hasbro could have just produced Cookie Monster in a smaller run, say 400 to 500 pieces, and sold it directly, and probably that would have worked. The niche amount of people who would have wanted this would have gotten a great HasLab in a very nice box. It had a premium box that was colorful, full of life, and gave the product that extra character. Honestly, these premium boxes make it perfect for vendors, toy store owners, and pop culture enthusiasts that can just have this on a shelf. I'm thinking about when I walk into a toy store and I see that Chucky doll still in box, or that Godzilla giant toy in that premium box. It's a great display piece. But let's look into my theory of why Hasbro did this in the first place. They were sitting comfortably for about 9 years with the exclusive license to sell Sesame Street toys, mostly preschool products aimed at parents, but that exclusivity deal was coming to an end, and within the next year, negotiations would begin to either renew the license or risk losing it to competitors. So what did Hasbro do? To strengthen their position in those talks, they rolled out a HasLab campaign that aimed to move $900,000 worth of product, and to show that it wasn't going to the preschool market, but to a brand new demographic, adult collectors. If they had pulled it off, Hasbro would have looked unstoppable. Any company that can prove it could sell nearly $1 million worth of high-end collectibles for Sesame Street would walk into negotiations with all the leverage, making a strong case that they were still the best partner to carry the brand forward. Now obviously, that failed, and now the brand no longer has the exclusive license for toys and games for Sesame Street. By the end of everything, the campaign only ever peaked at around 600 backers. And then people started backing out, and it closed with just 63 backers. The Cookie Monster HasLab remains the biggest failure in the series, and now I'll never have a life-size Big Bird in my home. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next toy breakdown.